This is 97.3 ESPN. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Tuesday edition of Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We are live in the Matt Black Kia Studios, hanging out with you. I am Josh Hennig. Glad to have you guys on board the show today. Of course, Sixers back in action tonight. They're on another road trip. We will talk about them coming up in about 20 minutes with our Sixers Insider Paul Hudrick from 97.3ESPN.com. Plus, don't forget, we have another Sports Bash Code Word coming up at 6:55 tonight. And we will get into the Eagles, the NFL draft, and your texts and connections at 609-403-0973 is the text board, 609-403-0973. And we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show at 973 ESPN. Just follow us on all the social media platforms. A lot to dive into today. Plus, just to expound on the conversation we started yesterday about the Sam Darnold trade, I gave you a full breakdown of what the Sam Darnold trade means for you over at our website, 973ESPN.com, and on the free 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. Listening to Mike Tannenbaum, the former NFL general manager, earlier today on the Sports Bash, I thought was some very interesting points that he brought up. And I wanted to run some of these points back with you guys today, because for those of you who didn't get to listen to the show earlier today at 2:30, and listen, you guys know how obsessed I am with the NFL draft. I love college football. I love the NFL. I love the NFL draft. This is kind of like, akin to candy shop kind of deal going on for me. And Tannenbaum brought up some very, very interesting points. And I want to start with the Sam Darnold thing before we get over to the Eagles, because Tannenbaum was the GM of the New York Jets. And you're talking about a guy who he was the last successful Jets general manager. The Jets are currently on their fourth general manager in the last 10 years. Their fourth. It's downright ridiculous, honestly. So when you are on your fourth general manager, that's saying something. So you know already that since Mike Tannenbaum left, this team has had pretty much no playoff success. None whatsoever. So when you think about this team moving forward, the Jets compared to the Eagles, and I make the connection because Joe Douglas was here and the Jets offered him a lot to go to there. We were told all along that Joe Douglas is a football guy. He knows what he's doing, right? But listen to Mike Tannenbaum, a guy who worked in the Jets organization, worked in the Miami Dolphins organization. He knows the NFL. He's well connected. He's well plugged into the league still. This is what he said about that trade. And honestly, I was surprised when I heard this.
I think it was a situation where there were a lot of options filled up quickly, and that's what happens. San Francisco was looking, Chicago signed Andy Dalton, even Houston signed Tyrod Taylor. So they were running out of options. So I think from a value standpoint, I think they did well. I don't think they crushed it because they just were running out of options. And, it was clear that, hey, we're going to go with Zach Wilson and let's just get, the most value we possibly can.
They were running out of options. They got the best value they can. Listen, sometimes it's not the right move to wait. I've always said before that if a team is presented with an opportunity that you can't pass up, don't. Because that's what happened to the Jets. The Jets ended up in a situation that they passed up on other opportunities because they were waiting out the market. And waiting out the market didn't do them much good at all. Let me lay it out for you this way. the Eagles turned around and said, we are going to try to move Carson Wentz as soon as possible. And then Carson Wentz became basically the second quarterback moved. They moved him before Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson were rumored to be moved. A month and a half later, Russell Wilson isn't leaving Seattle, and Deshaun Watson's got so much legal trouble, he can't be moved at this point. So it's hard to gauge the market when things like that happen. But when things like that do happen, you suffer the consequences. The Jets waited too long. They tried to wait out the market, and it blew up in their face. All right. So now the Jets are here. We know they're taking Zach Wilson. We know what they're going to do. And as I've told you multiple times before, the NFL draft starts with that 4th overall pick. Mike Tannenbaum agreed earlier on the Sports Bash.
The draft starts in Atlanta. I think obviously San Francisco is going to take a quarterback. I believe it's going to be Mac Jones from Alabama, and I think that's why Atlanta is the most interesting inflection point at this time.
The most interesting at this time. Because Atlanta could trade down. Adam Schefter reported that earlier, that there's a possibility that this could be a trade down situation. Now, there's no guarantee that's going to happen. Teams take calls, doesn't mean they're going to make the trade. But keep an eye on number 4. Because as I wrote over at 973ESPN.com, there are 3 teams that are later in the draft behind the Eagles that could all be candidates for trading up. Now, maybe not the 4, but maybe the Eagles at 12, maybe to some other places. Among those teams includes the New England Patriots at 15. Nobody in their right mind believes that the Patriots are just going to go into the season with just Cam Newton and Jarrett Stidham. I haven't read or heard a single report suggesting that. Everyone's suggesting the Patriots have a keen eye on the quarterbacks in this draft class. The Washington football team currently has Ryan Fitzpatrick, Kyle Allen, and Taylor Heineke as their projected quarterbacks for next year. Specifically, Heineke and Fitzpatrick are going to compete for the job. We know Kyle Allen got injured last year. He would probably miss half the season if he does come back for Washington. So we know they could be in the market. The Chicago Bears currently have Nick Foles and Andy Dalton. They could be in the market. That puts the Eagles in a position where people may want to trade up with them. People may want to get involved and trade up. And Atlanta's the linchpin, because if Atlanta gets a call from a team like Denver and they offer a good enough deal, they'll move down. I think Atlanta's position is similar to Miami and similar to the Eagles. They don't feel like they have to draft a quarterback this year. Now, part of it is because Matt Ryan really hasn't shown you any regression, but it's also because of the fact that, like the Eagles, they want to see what else they can do to fix their team. Atlanta was horrible last year. They lost so many games because of poor defense, poor offensive line play. They're just a mess. So to me, if I'm Atlanta, I stay there and pick Penei Sewell. But if a team like Denver or somebody else gives you a phone call and says, hey, I got a good offer, you can't say no. You're not just going to up and leave just because anybody called you, but if it's a good enough offer. So Atlanta, to me, controls the destiny of this draft. Because if they trade down, somebody's trading up for a quarterback, which means 4 quarterbacks go in a row, and then one of them is left dangling out there. If one of those quarterbacks gets past the top 10 picks, then the Eagles are in play. 110%. Speaking of the Eagles, we know the Eagles could use wide receiver help. Mike Tannenbaum touched on that about why the Eagles might not have to stay at 6 or draft a wide receiver at 12. Take a listen.
This draft is loaded with receivers, and I think there's guys going to be like Kadarius Toney from Florida available in the second round. And because of that, if you're in the first round, I think there'll be less first rounders going this year than people realize. And it's really because there's such great depth, and you have to think strategically just to maximize your opportunities.
Maximize your opportunities. That's the key word at the end. As I was saying to Mike Gill earlier on the Sports Bash, I am very conflicted personally on this whole best player available versus need front. I understand that there are people like Jeff Mosher, and I find that Jeff to be one of the best guys at what he does. He's great at gathering information and basically being a sponge, then communicating the information that he has gathered to people out there, whether it's on the Inside the Birds podcast, whether it's on the Football at 4 segments with Mike Gill. But I just don't believe that if I was in an NFL front office, that if I knew that I need a specific position, that I'm purposely passing up a position of need for a position of want. I understand that teams like the Dallas Cowboys do it, but the Dallas Cowboys have won a Super Bowl in over, 25 years? Just because other teams do something doesn't mean you have to do something. And I feel very strongly about this. If you're the Eagles and you pass up on a chance to get a game-changing elite talent on defense for a receiver, you're going to regret it. I just don't understand in what world you wouldn't regret that. I am thoroughly convinced, as I mentioned here on Game Night before, you cannot turn yourself into the 7-9 Saints. You cannot turn into the team that scores all these points and can't stop anybody. Because last year, your cornerbacks ended up being Kayvon Seymour, Cravon LeBlanc, Avonte Maddox, Jalen Mills, who you turned into a safety that had to run him back out the corner because you needed a quarterback. It was a mess last year. And I just don't believe in my wildest dreams, in any reality, that a rational person would say, well, I have Kyle Pitts as my best player available, but I'm not going to go out and get either Patrick Surtain or J.C. Horn because Kyle Pitts is available. I just can't do that. I just don't understand how anybody could do that. And I like what Tannenbaum said. Listen, there are other receivers in this draft. He mentioned Tony from Florida. There's Bateman from Minnesota. There's Terrence Mann from LSU, although I'm not a huge fan of Terrence Mann, but I understand the value in him, all right? There are other wide receivers. Listen, you know who's a freak who could end up being the steal of this draft? Rondell Moore. Rondell Moore is a guy you want to watch out for. He is not going in the first round. Do you know why Rondell Moore is not going in the first round? Because he made mistakes. He did not have a good year last year. In fact, he barely played last year. He only played half of Purdue's games. And he didn't even catch a touchdown pass. The year before, he was injured. He came out the gates firing, explosive. So he is 2 years removed from his breakout season. And the injury he had last year was a complete fluke. All right. It's been rumored. Nobody knows for sure exactly how he did it, but he injured a part of his leg. People conjecture whether it's his knee or his ankle, whatever, but it was a fluke injury. Rondell Moore is a guy who coming into 2020 was supposed to be this number 1 or number 2 receiver prospect. He got injured on a fluke injury off the field. He didn't play last year, and now he's coming out in the draft. He's proven himself to be healthy. He is going to be a steal for someone. And his name is not Devonta Smith, a Heisman Trophy winner. He's not Jalen Waddle, who didn't play at Alabama. He's not Terrence Mann, he didn't play at LSU. He is a talent. But guess what? You're not going to get him in the first round. So Mike Tannenbaum's 100% right. You don't have to draft the wide receiver to fill the need. You can get him later. And as Jeff Mosher said earlier on Football at 4. I'm telling you right now, you do not want to be the team that passes on these cornerbacks and watch them all be on other teams. If you draft corner 2 straight rounds, I know some people say I'm nuts. I'm fine with it. Because in reality, you are not winning football games in the NFL if you can't stop somebody. Jeff Bone and Pookie watching on YouTube at 973 ESPN says, half our DBs were out last year. Damn near all of our linebackers and our D-line was out as well, SMH. Listen, you're right. The Eagles couldn't stop anyone last year because when the starters went down, there was nobody behind them to fill the void. You don't want to be that team again. You do not want to be that team. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get to more of your comments a little bit later in the hour at 609-403-0973 is the text board. You can comment like Jeff Bone and Pookie did on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter as you watch the show on 97.3 ESPN Live, the Matt Black Kia studios. Matt Black Kia, they want to get you approved today. That's Matt Black Kia on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. Visit them online at mattblackkia.com. We'll jump into the Sixers coming up next. Paul Hudrick, our Sixers insider for 97.3 ESPN.com, joins me next to preview the first game of the Sixers' next road trip. They came home for a back-to-back 2-game set, and now they're back on the road. Talk with Hudrick coming up next here on Game Night. I'm Josh Hennig. This is 97.3 ESPN FM. Don't forget, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. You can get all the alerts. You want Eagles alerts, Sixers, Phillies, Flyers. Customize your alerts right now with the 97.3 ESPN mobile app.
If you own a small business, you know how hard it can be to find new customers. Now, Town Square Media has new tools that can help your business stand out and grow. Go to GetLocalCustomersNow.com for a free competitive analysis that will show you what other businesses are doing to find new customers and how you can do it too with Town Square Media. Be one of the first business owners to sign up and receive $500 in free advertising on this station. Start growing your business today. Visit GetLocalCustomersNow.com. That's GetLocalCustomersNow.com.
This is Cape May County Commissioner Len Desiderio. We are making progress in the fight against COVID. Please get tested and quarantine if you are positive to prevent the spread. Testing remains very important to our efforts. Everyone is frustrated by the slow supply of vaccine, but we are working with the state to get more doses to Cape May County, and we thank you for your patience. Make sure you are registered with the state at covidvaccine.nj.gov or call 855-568-0545 for personal assistance. COVID has used up so much of our patience, but we need just a little more. Thank you for all of your hard work. Now we have to finish strong, safely together.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here, back here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Like I said, we'll get back to your texts and thoughts coming up a little bit later this hour at 609-403-0973. Also, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, where you watch the show here on 97.3 ESPN. Speaking of watching the show, joining us live in the virtual flesh here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, it is Paul Hudrick joining us live here on 97.3 ESPN to get more in the Sixers. Back in action tonight, back on a road trip. I was trying to figure that out with Paul yesterday. He was very gracious to put up with my confusion yesterday, but he was also gracious to come up on today. Paul, how you doing today?
I'm great, Josh. Living the dream, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So first, let's get to the injury stuff. I know Doc Rivers spoke a bit ago. Explain to the audience what the latest is on George Hill, because I feel like there was this anticipation for fans. They traded for George Hill. He'll come back. And then it was, oh, well, he'll miss some time. And then it was, well, he might play the last 10 games of the season. And now I find what Doc said very important, because I feel like his description explains exactly why they're taking their time with him.
Yeah, 100%, Josh. And listen, I get it. Sixers fans, you guys have been hurt before. I know you still have PTSD from Andrew Bynum and other injuries. I get it. I don't think this is one of those instances. I think it is, like you said, Josh, what Doc Rivers explained is that type of injury, because he did have a surgical procedure on his hand that the nerves are still raw. So the issue is, if you are a basketball player, anyone who's played the game at any level, your hands are going to get smacked at some point. You're going to get hit with force on your hand. And so the thing is, he can't really do anything with contact right now, because if that hand gets hit, he's probably going to be in a lot of pain. So I think it's a matter of they're just going to take their time with it. And listen, you mentioned the 10-game window that Doc brought up before. That's still very much in play here. I think like the 26th against the Hawks, if he's back by that game, that would give him 10 games. He could be back even sooner than that. When Doc says not anytime soon, I don't think he means, oh, well, we're probably not going to have him until 5 games before the playoffs. No, I think he means he's not going to play this week. Like, don't expect him on the 4-game road trip, and maybe don't expect him the following week. You know what I mean? Like, I think he is just trying to temper expectations. He's trying to play it kind of more pessimistic, because he doesn't want to get people's hopes up. Because as I've mentioned off the top, I get it. You Sixers fans have felt that pain before, and I think he's trying to save you from that, to not get your hopes up, to think that he's going to come back sooner than when he's actually going to be able to come back.
And I think it's fair to assume that whenever he does come back, they're not going to rush him out there. They're going to ease him back into things, because the idea is that he's going to be a part of this team, not the main go-to for this team.
100%. And then the other thing is, Josh, I mean, this isn't his first rodeo. He's been around the league. He's been in big playoff games. He's done this all before. He's changed teams. He's been traded before. So this isn't like a guy who, is going to have to make some crazy adjustments or anything. He's 34 years old. He's played in the league a long time. As you mentioned, he's going to be a backup. He's going to come off the bench. That doesn't mean he's not going to play a big role, but he's going to be, a guy who comes off the bench, maybe give him 15, 20, 25 solid minutes a night, depending on the circumstances. And yeah, I mean, 10 games for a guy like that is like an eternity. And then on top of it, he's here. So he's with the team. He's with the team in Boston. So he's absorbing all the coaching. He's already in the playbook. Doc Rivers already mentioned that he's watching practice as if he was a coach, following along with everything. He's watching games. He's seeing guys' tendencies. Of course, it's different. Like, he's got to play with them. He's got to develop a little bit of chemistry. But again, we're not talking about a rookie. We're not talking about a young player. We are talking about a seasoned veteran that isn't going to need a ton of time to get acclimated.
Also, I will also bring up, this is an upper body injury. This is not the ankle, the knee, the foot. So he can still be out there doing running, doing the bike, doing things. He won't be in quote unquote basketball shape, but he'll still be in at least good enough conditioning. So the only thing you have to worry about is him getting that shooting touch back.
Right. And he's not, 7 foot, 280 pounds like Joel Embiid. I mean, this is he's a guy who's, kind of a thin frame guy. He's like kind of wiry. So he's not like this player who's big and bulky and it's going to take him a lot to get up and down the floor. No, I mean, this is a kind of a guy who's like spry and, he's 34 years old, but he's got, that's in a weird way, Josh, too, like this might be a blessing because he is 34 years old. So he's going to come into the playoffs down the stretch run. He's going to come in with fresh legs. So that might actually, in the long run, when the playoffs start, he's going to have fresher legs probably than anyone on the team and than a lot of guys going into the playoffs on other teams. So in a weird way, it could work out in the Sixers' favor. I get the concerns, but I wouldn't panic over George Hill. I think it's going to be fine. Again, I understand you guys have been hurt before, but I think this is a situation where it'll work out in the Sixers' favor.
Now, another guard that's been on topic this week is Tyrese Maxey. We know that he has continued to test negative. He is still probable for the game in Boston tonight, correct?
Actually, he's now listed as available.
Okay, so we've fully upgraded. So, all right, so the Sixers totally avoided that potential snafu situation, which is also important because there's no George Hill out there as well. Maxey's going to keep getting, you would expect, some minutes. And then, as you mentioned on Twitter, I love the way you put this somebody on Twitter. Somebody asked about Embiid. You said he is not on the injury report. And I don't think people understand the importance of that because being on the injury report gives you a reason to not play people. So if they're not on the injury report, they're 99.9% likely to play.
Giving something unforeseen between when that report is put out and tip off. Right. Yes. That means they are playing. They are getting ready to play. So Joel Embiid ready to roll. And listen, I think the reason he didn't play in that back-to-back, and Doc Rivers made it plain and simple, he didn't play for 3 weeks. You can't expect, and regardless of, you probably wouldn't expect any player that sat for 3 weeks to come in and play in a back-to-back. It's just not a reasonable thing. And then you add to it, again, Joel Embiid's size at over 7 feet tall, 280 pounds, his injury history. Why risk it? Why would you risk it? So it was the right move to do that. And I think that was the plan all along. And so I think he is healthy. I think the knee feels good. I think the knee is in a good place. I think now it's just for him. He's got to get his wind back. He's got to get his conditioning up. And I was encouraged by what I saw against Minnesota. I thought he played like 26 or 27 so minutes. And I don't think he looked like a little bit tired at the end, but not like we've seen in the past, Josh. I mean, we've seen him be out for stretches in the past, and he comes back and he just doesn't look right at all. At times, he looked like himself in that Saturday game. And at times he looked rusty, which is to be expected again for any guy who has missed 3 weeks. So I imagine, he should be playing tonight, and that's going to go a long way. That's going to help him out. And he's going to, the back-to-backs are going to be tricky. Doc said they're going to take them game by game. So it's not just an automatic that he's not going to play in them, but they're going to be careful as they should because this schedule is weird. As we've talked about a million times, it's so truncated, especially for the Sixers right now. They are just going through a brutal stretch of games where they have a 6-game road trip, come home for a back-to-back, then are back out on the road for 4, and then they come home to play the Clippers and the Nets. I mean, it's a gauntlet they are facing right now. So, be careful with them. It's the best move, especially considering all the other circumstances involved.
Although I can't promise you by the time the Nets game comes along, who actually is going to play for the Nets at that point.
For either team. Yeah, it's so true.
Well, especially the Nets at this point. I mean, now Harden has a hamstring strain. KD is considered probable now. Maybe Kyrie has another bar mitzvah to go to. I don't know. Paul Hudrick joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. Our Sixers coverage here on 97.3 ESPN being brought to you, ironically, by Trifecta Therapeutics in Glassboro, South Jersey's premier sports rehabilitation and physical therapy center, treating the pros and the Joes. Visit them online at trifectatherapeutics.com. Back to Embiid specifically, Paul. I loved what we saw from him on Saturday because we saw, like you said, he wasn't overly fatigued. He wasn't overly tired. And to me, it's such a sign to me of his maturity. I feel like this is the most mature he's ever been. People don't understand the value of he has a kid now. His life is different. He's living with his woman. There is a level of life that people get to when they hit certain ages or certain moments in their life. And I feel like that's part of what's bringing out the most out of Embiid. It's not just Doc Rivers, not just the players around him. It's that Embiid's personal life is in a good place, which is elevating his professional life.
100%. I mean, I always make the joke, but it's so true. Like I would hate to have had my private life my public life, my work life under so much scrutiny in my mid-20s. Like it would have been a disaster. So like just like I get it. They make a lot of money. That's what goes into all this. I understand that, but these guys are still human. They still go through the same sorts of things we go through. They still have issues at their jobs. They still have issues with their, personal private life. Things come up. You mentioned, the fact that he does have a son. Of course, that's going to impact your life in a huge way. And just the maturity I think that he is personally feeling for himself. And I think that's sometimes what gets lost with Ben Simmons too. Ben Simmons is 24 years old. I mean, he's got, he's going to still grow up and still mature. And it's just, I think we get so locked into the fact that these guys are athletes and are doing unbelievable things that none of us could even imagine ourselves doing. But they're still human beings and they still go through stuff. So I think with Embiid, you have to give him all the credit in the world because I agree with you, Josh. Of course, you give a little bit of credit to Doc Rivers. You give a little bit of credit to the team and the guys around him. But it's him. He has done it. He made the decision to get himself in the best shape he's ever been in. He hired a world-class nutritionist to take care of his body. And he's just made improvements in his game overall. You see what he's done. As far as when he gets double teamed and how much better he's gotten passing out of those situations, how he's almost automatic with that mid-range jumper now. And he has done this. He has taken the steps and he has made himself into this great player that we see today. And I think, with Ben Simmons, I understand the struggles. I understand the frustration people are feeling with him now. But I think that's something we all have to keep in our minds is that he is 24 years old. These guys are young, and it takes them time. Joel Embiid just turned 27 years old, Josh. I shudder what I was doing at 27 years old. I didn't want to think about it.
Well, also, Embiid's only been playing basketball for what, 14 years?
Yes.
Like the guy literally started playing basketball in his mid-teens, right? When most people who are in the NBA now, his age, were playing for those 13 years before he picked up a basketball.
And they're in AAU leagues and all this super competitive stuff.
Well, while he was in Africa playing on nets that look like they belong in like the 1930s. So at some point, I think that people misunderstand how player development works. Like just because these guys walk into the league at 18, 19, 20 doesn't mean they're going to be something by 22 to 24. I mean, I've heard multiple times guys who played in the league say this. It's around that 27, 28 that guys hit that prime of their career. And there's a possibility we still may not have seen the best of Embiid yet, which in and of itself is impressive.
Absolutely. And I am so curious with this team, what he's going to look like. Listen, he was great against the Celtics last year in the playoffs. Obviously, it was a rough series for the team, but he was tremendous in that series. I am so curious to see what he's going to look like this year in the postseason, considering the year he's having, considering the great shape he's taking, and the personal responsibility he's put on himself. I'm so curious to see how he's going to look. And I expect it to be very positive, and then the team around him too. I am just so curious to see what it's all going to look like, because I think, Josh, we're at a point where we kind of know what this team is for the most part. We've seen it kind of at its best, I think, and at its peak. And of course, George Hill is going to help that. But I want to see how that's all going to translate to the playoffs. I want to see if Joel Embiid is still going to look like this MVP candidate in the postseason. Is Tobias Harris still going to look like this guy who's providing that complimentary scoring, who's been a tremendous closer in the fourth quarter and has hit some huge shots? Is Ben Simmons kind of fit that Draymond Green type of role where, he's flanked by scorers and shooters and he could just kind of, wreak havoc on defense and facilitate offensively and find the gaps where he can to score. So I'm just curious, and it's a good curious. I'm just intrigued to see what it's going to all look like and if they can reach that pinnacle that they've reached at times this season in the postseason.
Paul Hudrick joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers versus Celtics night 7:30 here on 97.3 ESPN. Tom McGinnis on the call here on your home for Sixers basketball in South Jersey. Don't forget all of our coverage over at 97.3 ESPN.com for the Sixers. Paul, let's get into that game a little bit tonight. This is not the Celtics of even last year's playoffs. This is a team that's at 500. They look really rough at times. I mean, Tatum and Brown, for as incredible years they're having, Kemba hasn't been healthy. I still don't understand why they trade away Daniel Tice, except for maybe to save money, I guess. I have no idea. Okay, you inquired Evan Fournier, but that doesn't fix the fact that the rest of your team is kind of bleh. So, okay, you have two superstar caliber players in Brown and Tatum. Walker can't stay healthy. Smart is just coming back from injury. Fournier, he's a streaky guy as well. What the heck are the Celtics?
I don't think the Celtics know what the Celtics are at this moment. Fournier is not even, he won't be in the lineup tonight because of health and safety protocols. And, Fournier is fine. He's a fine player, but I think about him and Kemba as a starting backcourt, and good luck, playing defense with that. I mean, that's brutal. But then Robert Williams has actually been really, really good for them. He's a guy I really liked coming out. He's had some kind of maturity issues as he's kind of adapted into the league, but I think he might be a keeper. With that said, I don't think they did nearly enough in the offseason or at the deadline to improve their situation in their bigs. Yeah, I mean, Daniel Tice was fine. He's a fine player. He's okay. But I just don't think they have – I think what they need – and Robert Williams is still very young. I think they need a version of Robert Williams that's like 5 years older if they want to kind of compete at the level they want to compete at, because Robert Williams does a lot of things well. He's a really good rim runner, catches lobs, block shots. He's proven to be a pretty good passer as well and playmaker, but he's just not – he's not at that I don't think, at least, that he is at that developmental stage where he's going to be good enough, where he's going to be on the level of, say, a Tatum and Brown, who you mentioned are all-stars, who are unbelievable players. It's just they're in kind of a weird phase right now because they have Brown and they have Tatum locked up, but and who they play and how they look in that matchup.
Yeah, Robert Williams, 5 years older and 3 inches taller. I mean, the dude's only, they say he's 6'8". I don't even know if he's really 6'8". He might be closer to like 6'7", honestly. I mean, he's really not that tall. And you get a guy like Embiid. I mean, what's he going to do against Embiid? I mean, seriously. Heck, what is he going to do against Vucevic? What if the Celtics play the Bulls in like a play-in round game, right? Yeah. And it's like, all Vucevic says, give me the ball. I'm just going to back Robert Williams down because the dude's like 5 inches shorter than me. Like, I don't understand. You're right. They didn't build this team well at all. I feel like for years we heard about how great Danny Ainge was. This has got to be the worst team that Danny Ainge has built in his years of being competitive.
It's up there. Yeah, no, it's up there. And it's funny because I was put off. He did an interview recently where he blamed the players. And I'm thinking to myself, man, first of all, even if you really truly believe that, probably shouldn't say that to the media. Second of all, I don't buy that. I think that their issues are just as much, if not more, about the way the team was built, that he built. So, I don't want to say they're in trouble because they still have Tatum and Brown. And you're building around those two guys. That's a really good start. So they could, theoretically, Danny Ainge could turn this thing around this off, much like Daryl Morey did for the Sixers. You make a couple, kind of stealthy, savvy moves, you can get out of this pretty easily, and they could be right back in this thing next year. But I don't think they were built well this year, and I think Danny Ainge is going to have his work cut out for him building around Tatum and Brown going forward.
That's Sixers Celtics tonight, 7:30 here on 97.3 ESPN FM. He's Paul Hudrick, at Paul Hudrick on Twitter. Check out all of his Sixers work over at 97.3 ESPN.com. Also, the Coming In for a Landing podcast, available on your podcasting platforms. And Paul, before I let you go, I've given you a couple weeks here. Did you finish watching Justice League?
I did. So I will say this, significantly better than the Josh Whedon version. I don't think it's actually particularly close. It's just hard, though, because I can't separate it. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard for me to kind of just look at them as two different things because I already saw the first. The Batman scene with Joker was amazing. I felt like that was like just candy for Batman fans, which I guess that was the intention anyway. But I would have, you know what? It did make me think, man, I kind of would have liked to see where Zack Snyder was going to go with it, where Batman would have taken off from there, and where, you get the scene with Martian Manhunter, like where would that have all gone? So I am left with like a little bit of despair, not getting to know the full vision of that.
Yeah, I think you're not the only one, because I think when Zack Snyder spilled the beans online about what his vision was, his plans were for the rest of the movies, it was almost like a kind of like a letdown. Like, all right, well, you let the cat out of the bag now. That ain't going to happen. So it's almost like, what do you do now? And now the rumors out there that the Robert Pattinson version of Batman is going to be in the next Justice League movie, and they're going to have like a multiversal Justice League. And I'm just like, all right, here's just overcompensating for the fact that they know they messed up. So it's a strange thing. These people make billions of dollars and they can't get anything right. It's like sports.
Yeah, it's exactly like that.
He's at Paul Hudrick on Twitter. Check out his work over at 97.3 ESPN.com. Paul, appreciate you jumping on today, and maybe we'll catch up more off the air about the Justice League stuff. Okay.
Sounds great, Josh. Thanks, man.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Again, our Sixers coverage on 97.3 ESPN being brought to you by Trifecta Therapeutics in Glassboro, South Jersey's premier sports rehabilitation and physical therapy center, treating the pros and the Joes. Visit them online at trifectatherapeutics.com. We'll get back to your guys' thoughts and comments on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. All you guys watching at 973 ESPN. Also, text board is open at 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It is free, thanks to First Bank of Seattle City.
It's Sixers basketball tonight on 97.3 ESPN with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McGinnis, calling all the exciting play-by-play action.
Howard, though, with a rebound, putback jam. The White Howard throws it down, and the bench flexes for him.
The Sixers are in Boston to take on the Celtics tonight. Coverage begins at 7:30. Philadelphia 76ers basketball on your radio home of the Sixers in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN.
If you're struggling with alcohol or drugs, Recovery Centers of America can help. RCA's local inpatient and outpatient programs are founded on science and delivered with heart from an expert caring team who will inspire and guide you every step of the way. Call 1-888-RECOVERY now to speak with a treatment advisor. At RCA, you'll be in a community that builds connections and fosters support from peers and RCA's team of medical professionals and recovery support specialists. At RCA's state-of-the-art campuses in Devon, PA, and Mays Landing, New Jersey, they tailor your treatment to you and also offer specialized programs for patients with history of trauma, for patients who have achieved recovery but are experiencing a relapse, for young adults, adults 50 years and older, a confidential program for first responders and military, and a faith-based program. RCA answers the phone and accepts patients 24/7. And because it's local and in-network with insurance providers, treatment is affordable and accessible. Don't wait. Call 1-888-RECOVERY today.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN against Sixers basketball tonight, 7:30 on 97.3 ESPN. Phillies are 4-0 to start the year. With your thoughts and comments on the Eagles, the Sixers, the Phillies, and more. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Also, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. A couple comments to get to on YouTube and Facebook here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Want to remind my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook, baseball is back, and there's nothing like watching a game with great weather, a cold drink, and a little action with FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel is letting new users swing for the fences risk-free. You'll get up to $1,000 back if your first bet doesn't win. And once you have an account, you can get up to $25 back each day if your same-game parlay bet falls one leg short. This way, you can buy multiple baseball bets for an even bigger win all season long. These are just some of the reasons why FanDuel Sportsbook is America's #1 sportsbook. So download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, use my promo code Hennig to sign up to get in on the baseball action and get your first bet risk-free. That's promo code Hennig with FanDuel Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older to play and present in NJ or PA. First online real money wager only for risk-free bet. Refund issued as non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Restrictions apply. See sportsbook.fanduel.com for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, let's get to what you guys have to say over here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Before we hit the break, Tom chimed in over here on Facebook. Tom says, do you think the Nets have too many egos to succeed in the playoffs? Is the Sixers team enough chemistry to beat the Nets in the playoffs? So that's two different questions there. So I want to address them completely separately, Tom. And I appreciate you chiming in as you watch us on Facebook at 973 ESPN. I don't know if the Nets have too many egos because I feel like they figured out for now how to deal with those egos. It seems like for now they figured out the ego issue, which was who was going to basically handle the ball. And Harden said, I'll be the point guard. I'll be the facilitator, making Kyrie basically the shooting guard, and then Durant the primary scorer on the team. So it seems like for now, they have found a way to put aside the egos. To me, it's less about the egos right now. The problem is, are those three guys going to be on the court when the playoffs come around? Because Durant is supposed to be coming back from this injury, but now all of a sudden, Harden's injured. Harden's got a hamstring strain. So you had Durant go through without a hamstring, right? He had the issue. Now Harden has the issue. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means for this team moving forward. So to me, I don't know if they're going to be healthy. They're going to be 100% by the time they reach the postseason, or if they can play a full 7-game series together. To me, it's less about the ego. It's back to this: are they healthy? Are they fully committed? I mean, I know Durant and Harden, they're committed to basketball. Kyrie, it's hit or miss of what's going on with him. Durant has had some weird nagging injuries this year. Harden's got the neck. Now he's got the hamstring. I think the Nets, their concern might have been ego, and now the concern is health. To me, that's what's going on with the Nets. Now, is the Sixers team chemistry enough to beat the Nets in the playoffs? It might be, But to me, the bigger way of beating the Nets in the postseason has to do with you have to pick and choose if they are at full strength, who's going to beat you. Because you can't stop all three guys. You can slow the Nets down, but you can't stop them. One of those guys is going to go for somewhere between 22 and 32 points a night, no matter what. And you got to make a decision defensively. Are you going to let one of those guys score and then stop the rest of them? Are you going to just try to limit all three? Are you going to try to slow down Harden? There's a few different ways you can do this. You go back to the Rockets years when Harden was with Chris Paul. The way teams slowed down the Rockets was to slow down Harden. And they were forcing Chris Paul to beat them. And sometimes Chris Paul did beat him by himself. And sometimes he couldn't. I think that might be one way to beat the Nets. I think another way to beat the Nets is make them work. Make them work on the defensive side of the ball. So, for example, if you are the Sixers, try to run an offense that's going to make them run around, make them chase you a little bit. Maybe if you can force Kyrie, Durant, and Harden to get a little tired defensively, that'll limit them offensively. And I think that when you think about the Sixers' chemistry, I think that they definitely have more chemistry than the Nets, purely because of the fact that the Nets haven't played together much. Tom follows up and says about the fact that you have three guys who are used to taking over in crunch time with the Nets, and now they have to work together. Playoff time is a whole different mentality. It is. I think that the guy who's going to be the least a problem is Harden. Harden is fully committed to this team concept. He is fully invested in the idea of, I'm part of a team. I'm a team guy. I don't have to score for this team to win. Harden's not the problem. I think it comes down to Kyrie and Kevin. If Durant and Irving can figure out who's in charge, who's not in charge, and all that garbage, I think they'll be fine. But it's an interesting thing to watch with the Nets, because they're a science experiment on the basketball court in terms of ego, in terms of super. We've never seen three superstars who were demanding the ball as much as they do all work together before. It's a completely different animal than we've ever seen before. So I'm definitely interested to see how that goes. By the way, Sports Bash Cash, we're coming up in just about 20 seconds from right now here on 97.3 ESPN, the final Sports Bash Cash keyword of the day. Sixers tonight, 7:30. I think the Sixers cover versus the Celtics. That's your FanDuel Sportsbook pick of the night. I'm Josh Hennig. I'll catch you tomorrow on GameNight.
It's your chance to win Sports Bash Cash up to $10,000. Enter the code words every day at 973ESPN.com or with the free mobile app. The more codes you enter, the more chances you have to win up to $10,000. Here's the Sports Bash Cash code word.
Sync. S-I-N-K. Sync. Take the word sync right now and go to 973ESPN.com or the 973 ESPN mobile app for your chance to win Sports Bash Cash, brought to you by Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union for all of your lending needs. The next Sports Bash Cash keyword.
Sports Bash Cash, 10 times a day, every weekday at 55 after each hour, from 9:55 a.m. to 6:55 p.m. Listen all day for your chance to win Sports Bash Cash up to 10.